Good morning, microbiome tribe. All the all of us in the nerd space out there to go over some complex concepts here. I am going to review Star Edwards' presentation. Now, she's been doing this, I think, almost monthly now. She prepared a nice PowerPoint presentation here on the BiomeFX stool test. So I want to make the most of that, go over some of the points. It's laid out very nicely. You can get access to this. And I'm just trying to give kind of an overall big picture concept of approaching the BiomeFX. When I was doing consultations with bioidentical hormones and that whole era of education that was happening in the early 2002, 2003, when all of the hormone testing, the saliva testing, the blood testing, all of the estrogen studies were coming to light. What really helped was to get an overall concept of how it was trending. And that's what I want to present for you today, so that you get a feeling for how is the microbiome trending. And in the hormone world, what you quickly would realize is that if you had estrogen dominance, it pretty much dominated everything else that you would have. If you had high estrogen, you would have low testosterone, low progesterone, high cortisol, and that would shape this person's entire endocrine system, which would then affect their neurotransmitters, would affect their weight, would affect their gut. And so you could, by just knowing some simple where the hormones were trending, you could design a complete protocol. And the whole point was to help it trend the other direction. So that's what I wanted to talk about today with the whole BiomeFX. That once you see what the trending is, what the most important concept is, and when you look at the sample report, that's presented on that first page, and the trend is you want to look at the keystone strains. If the keystone strains are low, the functional analytes are low, the pathogens will be high, and the resistance, the protection for the microbiome will be low. So that is the trend. So your job is to put all of those in the other direction, to trend it in the opposite way. So that's the big picture concept. And I think if we start there, then what we're going to do today in this presentation is fill in the gaps, give you some really handy tools to fill in, how to present this concept to your patients and expand your practice with that as the center. So if you can see the screen here, what we've got is the goals for today, going over the BiomeFX updates, reviewing sample report, which I use now, the biomefx.com website. It's basically a presentation in itself, and some interpretation resources that will be provided in this PowerPoint. So the first is a discussion on why BiomeFX, and it starts out with really looking at what we know about metabolic endotoxemia. We know the risk factors, how it's created with the diet, the environment, with smoking, alcohol, glyphosate, different vaccines, pharmaceutical drugs, and I'm going to go ahead and turn my picture off so that the data streams a little bit better, if I can. Here we go. Okay, and dysbiosis, we know, is the biggest contributor to LPS, which is the primary endotoxin involved in metabolic endotoxemia. And once you've breached that barrier and you've got lipopolysaccharide and pathogens and toxins and undigested food flooding into the lumen of the cell, you've got a full-on immune attack with a cytokine storm, interleukin, raging, and gut on fire, inflammation. And how has your patient's microbiome been impacted? And what can they do to support the microbiome and restore the balance? So at that point, when you've determined what caused the problem, we're now looking for the solution. And many times it's helpful to have a test to lay this out for the patient so that they can see how they've been impacted. So the BiomeFX is available to assess how the gut is responding to patient protocols, increase patient motivation and improve compliance, personalized medicine, important clues for designing nutrition and supplement and lifestyle plans. So, how does this fit into your practice? And if you have a very strong testing platform in your practice, then you understand how powerful it is when you've got data points to look at to help really give the evidence toward what you're trying to educate and convince this patient they need to do as part of their plan. So who's a good candidate? Your patient whose microbiome might have been impacted by exposure to risk factors of leaky gut or have symptoms of dysbiosis and leaky gut. Patients who want to learn more about their uh, personality of their microbiome, the functions of the microbes who are living there, and specific recommendations for balancing the microbiome, the microbial ecology. I think as the different modules develop, there'll be some specific practices that focus in different areas, such as diet. Or if a person's primary focus is what type of diet should you be on, either genetically typing people, metabolically typing people, um, whatever, type of diet, whether it's high carb, low carb, carnivore, or vegan. This is a test that is going to really show, is your microbiome adjusting to the type of diet that you've decided you want to be on? Okay, so why BiomeFX? Well, the 4 points here is accuracy, actionable takeaways, microbe functions, and affordability. And, I still, when I talk to some practitioners, they're trying to compare our price maybe to, some of the other competitors on the market. And what they don't realize is that whole genomic sequencing used to cost thousands of dollars and take several months. So really, in compared to what it used to be, um, it's an amazing price. So we have to kind of look at the point of reference. When we look at the accuracy, I think we're starting to really shine the light on what PCR testing is and how inaccurate PCR testing is. Um, this is coming to light with the whole COVID tests and how many false positives are coming up in that test, skewing a lot of the statistics. And the same is true in the stool testing. PCR amplifies certain antigens, that are there and can really skew the data. So we look specifically, it's the terminology is 16S, which identifies 1 to 2 of 9 hypervaluable regions and gives high false positive rates. Whole genomic sequencing identifies the entire genome. Identification of the subspecies strain level rather than the genus. Whole genomic sequencing is 99% specificity and greater than 95.7% sensitivity. And this has to do with low false negatives and low false positives. And we're partnered with Cosmos ID, which is CLIA tested, GLP certified, world's largest and most comprehensive database of microbes, industry and FDA awarded winning challenges and Human Gut Project. And I like to point out too that this is the test that's being done at universities, in research labs, at government agencies, and used by pharmaceuticals. They do not use GI maps, Genova, diagnostic, and all of the tests that most functional medicine doctors are familiar with. The actionable takeaways: once you get the recommendations that's available on the recommendation link on biomefx.com, goes into diet, where you get specific fibers, proteins, and polyphenols that can increase or decrease the abundance of the balance of the microbiome. Uh, Also, lifestyle recommendations: sleep, exercise, smoking, hygiene, stress recommendations that impact specific microbes, and of course, supplement recommendations, nutrient ingredients that can increase or decrease specific microbial abundance. And we'll talk more specifically about that, because that it is presented somewhat generic, but I have a key presented here that will help you with some generalities. So the overview of the report: of course, all of you have seen the BiomeFX sample report or have had patient reports of your own, that it goes over the patient's overall gut microbe index, alpha and beta diversity, resistome occurrence index, the pathobiome, dysbiosis ratios, biologically important bacteria, and functional keystone species. The overview of the report: the different modules include saccharolytic fermentation, proteolytic fermentation, vitamin biosynthesis, hormones, and neurotransmitters. The interpretation resources: we've already mentioned before, there is a dedicated website called BiomeFX.com. And on there, you will see that there are BiomeFX practitioner trainings, which are short, section by section interpretation videos. And another section includes a PDF interpretation guide, which is very helpful. And the third part includes the report recommendations. The interpretation resources: you'll see that you have available to you a 20 to 30-minute consultation with our learning and development team, which are dedicated consultants that are interpreting the BiomeFX results day in and day out. So they're very well versed in it. And they're there for asking specific questions and to schedule, which are scheduled through a calendar software called a Pointy. And throughout the company, some account managers focus more on BiomeFX than others. I like to talk about tests and test interpretations. So I like, again, to review and to have this service available so we can bring case studies and talk about these at a level that hopefully will shed some more light on new interpretations, and always be learning and progressing in that way. Now, this is one of those charts that Star made that's very helpful. It breaks down the pathogens that are tested by BiomeFX into the categories of bacteria, viruses, parasites, and fungi, so that it's just easy to pick out who is who. And remember, these categories continue to increase as more of the genome, the complete genome, is known for each of these pathogens. This is a handy chart as well. This is the interpretation of the supplement recommendations. So as I mentioned, many of the recommendations are given in a somewhat general regard, and there's history behind this as well. In the beginning, the recommendations were in the actual report that you receive. And then when the report grew to 40 pages plus, it was necessary to take those recommendations out. And in many cases, those recommendations are going to be generic anyway. You're going to get a report that says an individual is, either too high or too low compared to the optimal range. Then the recommendation would be, here's what to do when someone's range is too high, and here's what to do when someone's range is too low. And then you go through and pick out the recommendations depending on where your patient's results fell, based on those guidelines. And some of the guidelines, if they were too specific, as in just giving our products, then that would seem biased. For if there was any FDA oversight, there have been problems in the past with companies that create the products and then they create the tests to promote their products, which is not what this is about. This is about the most advanced test and the most advanced products. But in order to remain somewhat neutral, they are just giving you the active ingredients so that it's really up to you. You can choose any other company that happens to have those ingredients. Just keep in mind the quality of those ingredients and how much experience they have with them. So this chart reflects that. So the ingredient in the recommendation will be, say, Bacillus clausii. And then this chart here will tell you that that is available in Megaspore and RestoreFlora. The Bacillus coagulans, and it lists the 3 products that we have that contains Bacillus coagulans: Megaspore, Wheat Rescue, and Megacidin. Bacillus endospores in general are going to be in, of course, all of our probiotics, the Wheat Rescue and Megacidin. The Bacillus subtilis is going to be in all of our products that have our spores in them. B. propolis, of course, is in the Mega Microbalance. Beta glucans is in the Megavirin. Citrus polyphenols in the Megamucosa. Cranberry polyphenols in the Megamune. Curcumin in Megavirin. Cysteine in the Megamucosa. FOX, GOS, XOS in the Megapre. Ginger in the Megagard. And then we have a chart here that is, again, continues on with that first. Green tea extract in the Megamune, licorice flavonoids in the Megagard, olive leaf extract in the Megavirin, polyphenols in the Megavirin, Megamucosa, and Megamune, omega-3s in the Megomega, pomegranate polyphenols in the Megamune, precision prebiotics in the Megapre, proline Megamucosa, quercetin in the Megavirin, Espillardi in the RestoreFlora, and the Wheat Rescue serine in the Megamucosa. And then the serum-derived immunoglobulins in the Mega IgG 2000 and Megamucosa, supplements that increase butyrate in the Megaspore and the Megapre, sulforaphane in the Megamune, transferrin in the Mega IgG 2000, threonine in the Megamucosa, undecanoic acid in the Mega Microbalance, vitamin K2 in our Megaquinone, and Milemax, the yeast ferment, which is in the Megamune, and this is not yeast, it's fermentation metabolites from yeast, mushroom powders in the Megavirin. And then there are those that we don't have, and they also are in the recommendation, such as 5-HTP, alanine, anthocyanidins, arabinogalactan, aspartate, calcium D-glucarate, cellulose, chicory root, D-mannose, dandelion, DIM, glutamate, glycine, high-dose vitamin C, lauric acid, lysine, manuka, honey, melatonin, methylated forms of the folate, multiple vitamin mineral supplements, pea protein, pectin, psyllium husk, raw potato starch, resistant starches, resveratrol, spirulina, tyrosine, vitamin B6, vitamin D, whey protein, lactoferrin. And if you're a practitioner in this field for any amount of time, you deal with a lot of different supplement companies. And if you're like me, it was always just an investigation of trying to keep up on what latest technology, who had the best, and then balance out the best price with availability with what you could afford. I mean, it was this constant spinning plates in the air to, figure out how to deliver to your patients with good conscience the best you could afford. So, just know that I've been there. I've played that game, and it's a challenge. And I sit here, as you look behind me, with probably $10,000 worth of inventory that is going to all expire because, yeah, we've played this game for 30 years, and anyway, got caught in a lurch. So next slide. More interpretation of resources coming, and this is exciting. That there's going to be a library of recorded case studies for case-specific ideas. Short training videos and emails will increase, and expanded consultation team, and that's already happened. I know many of you who've already had a consultation. There was a period of there, it was hard to book one. I think that department has doubled or tripled, and they have added a lot of consultations so that that won't be a bottleneck. Another added service is Patient Direct. So what that means is your Patient Direct is that link that when you sign up for Patient Direct on your website, it allows you to have a link that you can send to your patients. They order from our website, and then that generates commission checks that accumulate and then is cut. Now BiomeFX is available through that Patient Direct. So your patients will be able to order from our website, order the kit, which will to them will be $3.99, and then you're receiving a commission out of that. You earn, it says here, 30%, which is quite generous on the market. And most commissions out there average 20%, even though you'll see it appears to pay you more, but you also realize that they're charging more retail to the patients. So in order to pay the higher, so you have to kind of look at the average. So this is a higher, the BiomeFX is more complicated, and it would make sense that there would be a higher commission on that because there's a lot more self-training that the practitioner has to do in competency to speak to the concepts that we're discussing now. Results will come to your provider portal. So that way the practitioner is still in control over the results and the interpretation. And then the end of the slideshow here is on the references. And I think she has here, the study provides positive and negative controls, titrated standards, and a guide for selecting tools for metagenomics analysis and comparing ranges and precision. So I'm going to just click on that reference. Let's see what she has referenced here. Okay. So she's got an article. It looks like the BMC must be the British Medical Community, or I'm not exactly sure what that stands for. We might see it here. I don't accept all cookies. I don't want to. I guess I have to. Okay. So the title is Comprehensive Benchmarking and Ensemble Approaches to Metagenomic Classifiers. Okay. So, and I think what you'll glean from this is that these concepts we're discussing, 16S, RNA, that's what the COVID, test is. So we're discussing state-of-the-art concepts here. And you'll see many of the graphs that are in your sample report with BiomeFX is what you'll see in the published literature. And so what you're learning is the latest, biological, metabolomic, microbiome science. Okay, so we'll that, and then I'm just going to go to the BiomeFX website just to review where these resources are. Of course, in the education, you've got your practitioner training videos that were mentioned, the sample report, the interpretation guide, and the recommendations. Now, what I like also about this site is that at the very bottom, where it says how to use, is just a great little video to have your patients watch. It's funny, it's well produced, talks about how to collect their poo sample. And so that's real handy and makes your job easier. And of course, this is also, where the sample report is, and gives you other resources on how to order, how to register the kit, um, and so forth. Okay, and I think without actually going into the sample part, why don't we go ahead and do that? Uh, there hasn't been any changes to that in a while. So right now we still have the overall report summary. And I'm just going to review that trend that I mentioned in the beginning. Keystone strains, uh, and you see some high results here. A lot of these are high because they are compensating for the low ones. They will balance out once you get the spores in there to modulate the environment. So that's important to see, that the imbalance of keystone strains need to come into balance so that the functional metabolites will come into balance. And those keystone strains will push out the pathogens, competitive exclusion. That will increase your antimicrobial resistance, which is your protection by your microbiome, which will overall improve your diversity. And that will give you a better score. So that's the trend that everybody wants to head toward, the right direction. So that's the index that you'll see where you're at as your baseline, and then you know where you want to go. And then for each of those, we've gone over this before, how it breaks down the alpha diversity, what are the right bugs for your gut, and beta, is this combination good for where you live and how you eat? And then the scale on the antimicrobial resistance, the phylum composition is like looking down someone's throat, and if you were able to see their bacteria with a color code, that's what this is, looking down. And the main thing to look for here is your Firmicutes to Bacteroides. That's the primary ratio of importance here. And it's very obvious. There's too many Firmicutes, which tends to be the pathogenic trend. So you want, to always look for that and help the individual push that into the other direction. Same thing on the family pictograph here, looking down their throat to see, the variety of bacteria and where that's going to be off. And now the ratios. We mentioned the Firmicutes to Bacteroides key ratio, and this has a lot to do with the person's metabolic index. Are their bacteria, setting them up for a good metabolism to burn fat? Or are they behind the 8 ball and they struggle burning fat, and they're always going to, be putting on weight and struggling with their weight? Then the proteobacteria to actinobacteria. Again, the good guy on this one is the actinobacteria, just like the Bacteroides. So you want more actinobacteria. And this is, again, going to help the whole idea of keeping the inflammation down. It says here, increasing actinobacteria can be accomplished using plant-driven carbohydrate starch polysaccharides, the FOS, GOS, and XOS. If you remember back to that chart, you look those up, and then you'll see the mega prebiotic, because we give you all of those, which are real important. But the inulin and the arabinogalactan you have to get from other sources. Inulin sometimes feeds pathogens, so it's advised to start with just the FOX, GOS, and XOS from the prebiotic to feed just the keystone strains first. So you're not encouraging just feeding everybody, including the pathogens. Okay. And then the good guy here is the Bacteroides versus the Prevotella. So you want more the Bacteroides ratio. And this has to do with, animal fat versus plant fibers. You're going to have more Prevotella if you have a high protein diet with the wrong bacteria. You're going to make a lot of toxic byproducts. So, and there's other examples of that trend here. Escherichia coli and the Biophila wadsworthia, of course, are the pathogens that are detected. But again, the trend is increase the keystone strains and it competitively excludes the pathogens. So even at this level of pathogens, I would say this is not worth a search and destroy mission to focus on the pathogens and drop a bomb in the microbiome, because that's too much collateral damage. And this could be something that just increasing the good guys could force out the bad guys without that collateral damage. Here's the list of the pathogens. Again, I ask you to refer back to Star's chart where she breaks it down to the different bacteria versus viruses versus fungi, so you can address those specifically. And then we go into the metabolites, first of the carbohydrate breakdown through saccharolytic fermentation. And this is where you can be able to give dietary advice. Look at the primary, macrobiotic categories that they're eating from and see if that's appropriate for them. And you do that by, seeing how well they're breaking down their carbohydrates versus their proteins. And this is proteolytic fermentation, is where we get into the protein breakdown. And are they having trouble breaking down those proteins and producing toxic byproducts that is shifting their pH and creating ammonia or hydrogen sulfide gas? And ammonia is very toxic, and it's toxic for many tissues of the body, the liver, the brain. So it's important to control that. Then you've got the estrobiome. We're looking at sex hormones. You're looking at neurotransmitters that are produced by the bacteria in the body. So improve the colonies, improve the community, and you improve the person's outlook on life, that gut-brain connection. And this gives you some clues at what they're dealing with. And then here's the specific ranges of the keystone strains, and who's not there and who's overcompensating. Okay, so that's the end of the sample report. And hopefully in this presentation, I gave you just some clues on, say, the big picture trends and where you want to go with that as an overall goal and how to present that. And I will now stop this presentation and open it up for any questions that we might have. Did anyone hear anything new or see anything new that you wanted to share?
Hey, Tracy.
Hey there.
It's Christine. I had to, my internet connection was awful. I'm outside. So, and it's probably windy, so I'm going to turn around for a second. So I was wondering if, when you were talking about the nettle or the megavirin, I'm trying to identify if it's an allergic reaction to nettle that I'm having. Have you heard of anybody having like a cross reaction? Because it's happened when I've taken the megavirin, and it's happened when I've had or taken Designs for Health product, which has quercetin and nettles. Those are the only two ingredients in it. And so I get a headache, and then when I take my usual like melatonin and 5-HTP for bedtime. The next day I wake up with a even worse headache and nausea and sometimes vomiting, diarrhea. So I won't touch either one of those products with a 10-foot pole now.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's nettles, it typically increases serotonin.
Yeah.
You know, but I don't know if I thought that it was more of a localized reaction when you touch the plant. Not, well, I mean, I guess you're taking it internally. So yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard that or anybody else on the line.
No, I haven't, but I'm trying to understand. You're thinking it's a die-off reaction, a detox reaction of metals, that the quercetin is detoxing metals in your body, from your body?
Oh, no. I'm saying nettles, like stinging nettles.
Oh, nettles. Okay, sorry.
And it's in November. Yeah.
Got it. No,
sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nettles.
So, all right. So I've
which
looked up...
is in Megaviron and Designs for Health quercetin and nettles product.
Okay. All right. So I'm looking at Megaviron here. I'm just trying to find. Okay. So turmeric, quercetin. So you're saying quercetin is derived from nettles? Is that what you're saying? The source of it?
No, quercetin is its own. Quercetin, right. No, quercetin is derived from flavonoids like onion peeling and other things. The nettles is derived from the stinging nettles plant.
Oh, okay, I found it.
Which I actually grow on my property.
Right. Yeah. So there's 250 milligrams of stinging nettles in there. And you're saying in other products, you've narrowed it down to the nettles as the cause of this reaction.
I know it's definitely not the quercetin because I take quercetin on a daily basis, the prophylactic dosage. So that's the only other thing that's, I thought maybe it dehydrates me, but then that doesn't explain the nausea and the diarrhea the next day.
Right.
At all. It's actually more like a serotonin overload reaction. Weird.
It might be just one of those, quirky particular sensitivities that you might have. I haven't heard of it, but certainly I've heard of other unexplainable quirky things with other products. So, but it's good to know.
True, yeah. Yeah, so I was just throwing it out there in case, I mean, if I think it all the way through, the serotonin deal does interact with the gut,
right,
strongly. And so it would kind of make sense if nettles normally cause somebody to produce serotonin, or whatever, then it would kind of make sense that it would just be too much for me in particular.
Yeah. Now,
so especially given that I take melatonin and 5-HTP.
Right. Well,
separately before bed.
When we're talking about trends, the trend should be if this is a sensitivity, if it was caused from leaky gut or metabolic endotoxemia, then the more gut health, healing and sealing should reduce any sensitivities, including to supplements. So that should be the trend. Now, where did you read that nettles particularly increases serotonin? Is that documented somewhere?
Yeah, it is. I don't know exactly where, but it's a kind of, sorry, I'm having to walk by stupid dog that doesn't shut up. It's typically, I've read it to do with, my population, which is mental health and addiction. So the mental health component, like nettles tea, it can benefit for people who have low serotonin, that kind of stuff. So, but unfortunately, I can't recall anything right at this moment.
Okay.
It's just something I've known that's, yeah.
Okay.
And I had a client over a while back that that was prescribed like 5 different medications, and then on top of it, she tried taking something I don't remember supplement wise, and all of the different medication interactions were causing her to have serotonin syndrome, and so she was constantly vomiting and all this other junk. It was a disaster. She ended up having to call, because it's outside of my scope, I had her call poison control. I think I talked to you about her.
Yeah, and medications, especially pharmaceuticals, can do that. I've never heard of that happening with any type of herbal applications. The stinging nettles, I'm just reading here in the megavirin, are there, as it says, to protect human tissue by reducing the inflammatory cytokine production and promote cellular regeneration and repair. So that's the point of it being in this formula. But it could be causing havoc, you know, for you particularly from some sensitivity.
Yeah, I wonder if, because I know they are highly beneficial. There's also a thing where the people in the past, they would thrash their arthritic joints with the nettles, and it would relieve the pain. Of course, it's probably, in my thinking, it's like, oh my God, it's because it's so painful to do it. You're distracted. But anyway.
Exactly. Use a hammer, hit your thumb, and all of a sudden your headache goes away.
Right. Yeah, they would say suck on a piece of ginger in your lip or whatever, and it relieves headaches. I'm like, yeah, that's because you're focused on the burning sensation in your lip, not your headache. But no, seriously. But as far as like a herbal, like a plant interaction was my other thought was, you know how they say if you're allergic to, oh gosh, like
chamomile,
I can't remember what family it is, but then don't, echinacea, yes, exactly. So that was my other thought with it. But I don't know. I tend to be the canary in the coal mine. So.
Yeah, but it's important to talk about it.
But yeah, and you can induce that reaction.
We're dealing with a population of canary seeing practitioners, so we need to keep bringing it up. So if we do start seeing or hearing of a trend, we can put it together.
Oh yes, good point. Yeah, and just as an aside, with the work that I do with amino acids, you can actually induce various things that typically are only seen from pharmaceutical stuff. So you have to be careful. Like if they're on certain medications, you know, don't have them take L-tyrosine, or some people can't take L-glutamine. It just, it's just kind of very personalized type thing. So
yeah, and keeping in mind too, what we're learning when you have a dysbiotic gut, when you have a bad combination of bacteria in your gut, they unconjugate pharmaceutical drugs, they unconjugate amino acids, they unconjugate estrogens, and they unconjugate bile salts, creating toxic byproducts. So, you know, we have to keep all of that in mind too as we learn more about the gut and their communities. And those are going to increase recycling toxins.
That makes sense.
With a heavier load on the detoxification pathways.
Right.
So, yep. Okay.
Do you do any of this going over the BiomeFX stuff separate?
I do. You know, there was a time, as I mentioned, that the consultants were overloaded, and so I was just trying to get the word out that it's very frustrating if you've waited 5 weeks for a result and then you hear that you've got to wait 2 more just to get it interpreted, that you don't have to wait. I can at least go over and give some input so that if you can, you know, get your patient started on the protocol and then book book the other consultation to get some fine detail minutia, at least it was an option. So yes, I've been doing that. I provide that service, and I will continue to do that. I think they're doing a lot better as far as getting you in right away, though. So I like to hear the feedback because I want to continue to learn as well. Sheila had learned some pearls, some gems, and shared with us. Uh, you know, for instance, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sheila, but the idea was that if you're having yeast type of symptoms and your BiomeFX comes back, it doesn't identify in Candida, but if it does identify some of, the actinomycin, which is kind of the large family of yeast, then it would make sense why you were having yeast type of symptoms. But again, we have to know more about the individual characteristics of these larger families of organisms, so we can share that with our patient. Was that correct, Sheila?
Yes, that's correct. And in further study, because I'm comparing it, the BiomeFX with organic acid tests, because organic acid tests will pick up the Candida yeast mold, where stool tests, if it's there, well, you have a problem, but if it's not there, it's hidden, because yeast and fungal don't show up in stool as well. But also in one of the oat tests, it was showing high markers for ketosis. And so I was talking with my trainer, and he was like, yeah, this is another sign of mold toxicity. And I'm like, aha, because there's one of the Prevotellobacteroides and one other one, I have to look it up. My whole family, we don't eat keto. We are not high fat, high meat eaters. We're pretty balanced in that. And yet all of us show this low Prevotellobacteroides ratio. And he's saying it's because the yeast is stealing the fibers or the whatevers are needed for those other good guys. So it looks like we're doing ketosis, but we're not. It looks like we're in ketosis. So it's just another clue, because you're not going to always get that clue on a stool test that, oh yeah, there's a yeast overgrowth here. You're not going to always get that.
Right. And I think that's where this test is going to evolve to, where we see more patterns. What does a mold toxicity look like in a BiomeFX? What does a SIBO look like in a BiomeFX? Because there is no mold toxicity module or SIBO module. We're going to have to see which indicators are pointing in that direction. And then I think it'll be part of that interpretation guide down the road.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. And the other thing too is like the saccharolytic fermentation. Like my son, especially, he eats loads and loads of beans, and his was like really low. And so it's like there's something else going on, because so she was like, oh, maybe he needs HCl. But if you have low HCl, that could also be an indicator of H. pylori, which may not necessarily show up in the stool sample. But if you look for a pattern, or so it's still, you have to kind of like correlate and make sure that there's like two points pointing, or 2 or 3 points pointing in the same direction, right?
Exactly. So you're saying you've got to form a triangulation for a better interpretation.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Good stuff. Okay, I am going to shut off the recording here and find out how you all are really doing.